and welcome back to Just Talking Business. I am Stephanie Van Bark, and I'm a small business owner. And this show is all about the pivot. And today we're going to talk to someone who has sort of a global look of what that has had to be after the pandemic. And so I met him through Zachary Evangelista. We did a show with him a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very excited to bring him on board. Hi, Mark. How are you today?
It's great to see you. By the way, I love your intro and the intro music.
It's my little morning exercise.
I thought to myself, my goodness, you got my groove going. One of
Good.
your guests that you showed had a cool hat on that said "No Days Off," and I'm like, I have to get that hat.
He's okay, so he's a personal trainer, and so I'm pretty sure you can get it. But you got
I'm
to
gonna
work
wear it. I'm gonna wear it. I have a trainer, and we train 2 days a week, and he is relentless.
on
So Omar, if you're listening, I'm on to you, and I'm gonna get
it.
both of us that hat. All right, that's your gift as we come up on our 1 year anniversary of working out
We'll make
together.
sure that happens. We'll make sure that happens. So, thank you for agreeing to join us today.
Oh, thank
If
you.
you would start by telling us who you are and what you do.
Thank you. So I'm Mark Trowbridge. I'm the president of the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce. We are a very traditional chamber located in Coral Gables, but about 25% of our membership is outside of Coral Gables across greater Miami and other points. And we've been in business as a chamber for just about 97 years, 98 years coming up on. And what's really great about that is that I've been our longest serving CEO at 16 years. And what an incredible journey it's been. You couldn't
Mhm.
have told me when I got here in 2006 that, all of these years later, I would still be working with all of our great local businesses, but that we would have been through a great recession, multiple hurricanes, and of course, a 2 year plus now global pandemic.
Right.
Couldn't have predicted any of those. Like, I think about my predecessors, and I'm like, they just had to get up and they would golf and maybe sell a membership in a week. And I'm like,
Good luck with
we
that.
are, as you said, making the ultimate pivot, still doing that
Well,
every
look,
single
you're the perfect person to talk to about this whole pivot dynamic for sure. Because before the pandemic, in this market, we are in the Miami area. The biggest pivot we had to think about was hurricanes.
That's right.
Um, so those conversations are having to change a lot. So let's start with what is a chamber. I want to make sure everybody understands what
Sure.
a chamber is.
So there are thousands of chambers of commerce across the United States and globally. And what we do is bring businesses together to create a platform for them to do business with one another. So think of it as the
Mhm.
ultimate in networking organization. So, part of our role is to create the space to do that networking in. And the other piece is, bringing the right players to the table. So if you say to me, hey, I'm a business banker, but I really want to meet those businesses that have about $1 million of revenue a year. And
Mhm.
so, we make a lot of those introductions one on one, but we also put people in a space where they do what they do best, which is network, introduce themselves, sell their products and services. And as I always remind them, don't forget the most important element, follow up. And
Right.
so creating relationships, I think, is the business that we're in. We were together, as you know, a few days ago.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I kept thinking about while I was sitting there and looking around the room is that small businesses are really our chamber's heartbeat. It's what, keeps that blood flowing, not only as an organization, but also I think keeps us very motivated, very
Mhm.
focused, and very, very keen on helping them not only survive this last 2 plus years, but thrive once again.
So, what are the lessons you've learned? And you did mention the summit, and we will definitely get to that for sure.
Yeah.
Having been this chamber um, president who has gone through all of these shifts,
Yeah.
what do you think you've learned the most about having to pivot that now, in your growth, you've learned to help businesses through?
So that's a great question. What I would tell you is it'll sound a little unorthodox, but I've learned that sometimes we've got to get out of our lane.
Hmm.
Our traditional lane is bring a member in, connect them to the people they want to meet, and support whatever it takes to help them, do business and utilize the chamber's channels as best as possible. And what I would tell you, even going back to the Great Recession, is we spend a lot more time checking in on folks. I
Hmm.
would be like, Stephanie, what's going on in your business? Who are you talking to? Where are your struggles? Typically when you go to a networking event, people are like, how are you? And your immediate response is, oh, I'm great, or I'm fine. Everything's going wonderfully, because we want to give that outward perception that we're a success.
Hmm.
What I have learned over the last 2 years is that people are a lot more comfortable saying, I'm struggling.
Right.
I'm dealing with everything from, my business isn't open, or, I'm
Hmm.
waiting to hear about a PPP loan, or, I need to hear back from the SBA about an EIDL, economic injury loan.
Hmm.
Or I'm depressed. I'm at home and I'm not around people. I draw energy from people. We talk a lot more about things that people are dealing with. I can't find the staff that I need. It's
Hmm.
me there 7 days a week. I have to close now on Mondays so I can have one day a week. I'm not seeing my family. And so, uh, I think the pandemic has put a magnifying glass on the fact that
Hmm.
we as organizations can also step outside of our traditional roles and comfort zones and just check in on people, like, what's going on? How are you doing? How's your mental health? I don't think we ever
Had
talked
those
about
topics.
that as a chamber, because it just seemed like that was somebody else's job.
Right.
And now I would say we're putting our arms around our members in a much more warm, authentic, and empathic embrace.
And do you think that was as a result of, the pandemic? I know brought a lot of that out, but I've had a chance to talk to some of the folks that have been support to that ecosystem, also had to struggle
They did.
during that time as well. What was the impact to your chamber, to the businesses and the members of your chamber? And do you think that was a direct result of how you're having to operate as well?
So I do. And I think, we learned some lessons, I think, during the Great Recession, when it was really an economic tsunami. So you were dealing with, all of our friends who worked at our banking institutions. And in our chamber, after real estate, our largest cross section of members really is, financial services and banks. And they were at the epicenter of that. And so, those folks were going through takeovers, consolidations, job loss. And so we learned a lesson or two from that.
Hmm.
But that, even in its year plus time frame, and then another 2 to 3 years to recover, was nothing like the fact that, COVID hit every business.
Hmm. Hmm.
So think about, somebody who needs that level of support for themselves or for their staff. Well, those nonprofits were dealing with the same woes as everybody else. They were closed. They were maybe unable to take their services to a Zoom. That's hard to do.
Right.
But over time, I think we all got very creative. I think we all got very focused on the fact that we can do this.
Right.
We just have to, take a deep breath and allow those things to happen. A hurricane is a devastating occurrence.
Hmm.
And I think about Hurricane Irma that happened, right after Labor Day a few years ago. So,
Hmm.
for 2 or 3 days,
Yeah.
you are in the bullseye.
Hmm.
We've all been through the cone, and the cone is shifting, and we've dodged a bullet, or we're on this side of the storm or that side of the storm. And we work together to make preparations. You didn't see that coming from the
Hmm.
economic tsunami of 2008, 9, and 10, nor did you see that with COVID. We had a little bit of an inkling because we saw what was happening in Asia. But I think Americans are always the type that look at that and say, well, that's over there or that's somewhere else. And then all of a sudden it was here, and we just had no idea. We had
What
no,
we were to
none of us
expect.
were alive in 1918 when the Spanish flu came through this country and ravaged, humanity.
Right.
But we also weren't the type of economy that we are now. It was the Industrial Revolution. And now, people are working in a very different way. So I will tell you that, we've learned some lessons. We were ready to pivot. We got lucky because we had an employee who had just been on family leave and had just come back before COVID came. And so we had already tested all of our systems to be remote because we had done that with her. And so we
Okay.
were lucky, other than having to up our licenses a little bit. We were in a space where we could make that pivot quickly. So we closed our offices. We had our last formal chamber event, March 17th, 2020. It was St. Patrick's Day. That event normally would have 50 to 60 women at it,
Mhm.
but people were starting to get a little bit nervous. The schools were still open, but businesses were starting to make decisions. And so I think we ended up with about 15 people
Oh, wow.
persevered. And I kept saying to people, are you comfortable? Are you okay? This is what
Right.
we knew to do. Social distance, don't shake hands, and use hand sanitizer. Like,
Right.
that's what we knew. And we canceled our breakfast on the 19th, and then we closed the office the next day. But I went, the staff worked remotely. I came to the office every day, Saturdays and Sundays, because we were
Okay.
putting out videos about PPP when that came to fruition, how
Very
to
nice.
contact the SBA. We
Mhm.
did videos every single day. Like, this is what we're working on. And we did our first Zoom event the following Thursday on the 26th of March. We didn't even have a Zoom account. We had the 40-minute free account. So we called one of our members who we knew did remote coaching. And I said,
Uh,
can we use your Zoom? And would you do our program? And we had over 100 people come to it.
wow,
Like,
nice.
what are we doing? We miss you, and we're sitting here at home, because by then, on March 26th, businesses were shuttered.
Yeah, we
Even
were
the
in the
essential
house.
ones were figuring it out. So,
Mhm, mhm.
uh, and then we didn't see our staff for months, and then they would come in one day a week,
Okay.
and be one person here with me, but no interaction. If you needed to come get, a file, they had to teach me how to scan, which was hilarious because they didn't want me to learn, because I think it's job security, right? So they're like, you really need to learn that skill. I'm like, yeah, how does it work? I'm standing here in front of the copier.
No,
How
we
do I
don't
do
do
this? So I learned. So now I can still do it today. And they're always like,
that.
scan that yourself. I'm like, I sure do.
Hey, you taught me. Hey.
So I was pivoting myself. And, I would work from 9 to 5. There was no place to go for food, right?
Right.
So, I would typically, I would leave. I would usually take me 30 minutes to get home. I'd get home in 11 minutes.
I
And I
know.
don't remember ever being at the chamber and being home at like 11 after 5.
I know.
There was
That was
always a chamber event or a networking event or something like that. And, people would call me and say, are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, why? And they're like, well, you're such a social creature. Like, what's it like? I said, well, my dog is at home. I got really into plants and flowers and started planting and doing that. I got a TikTok account, so I was obsessed with TikTok. I mean, Stephanie, I'm not proud of those moments, but there were some good habits and bad habits, and of course, I'm a big reader, and so I was
There
like
were some
catching up.
shows I'm like,
Yeah, I
I
caught
look
up on,
at
well, I was doing like everybody else was doing and watching, the Tiger King, and then I
right.
watched Bridgerton, and I'm like, what is this? I mean, I don't usually watch any TV or stuff. Everything's always in queue.
And
So,
then I feel a little ashamed about that, but I was all
oh,
in at the time.
a ton, a ton.
His brain cells dying,
Because
but
I'd say to
okay.
people, I'm like, are you watching this show? And they're like, yeah, you're watching that? I'm like, yeah,
Me
because I'm
too.
home at like, 5 o'clock, and I eat
I
something,
don't
and then I'm
have
like,
anything
now
to
what?
do. I don't
Because
even
the dog looks at me like, why are you here? Why are you bothering me? Setting my routine.
So it was interesting. I actually danced in Coral Gables at the Fred Astaire studio, and afterwards we would go to different restaurants. But I noticed after the pandemic there were some pretty um, restaurants that have been around for years that seemed to not be able to reopen their doors.
Yeah,
There were, and that was happening all over the country. Obviously,
sure.
I think I read some statistic like 40% of small businesses closed. So, coming out of the pandemic, are you and your staff, as well as other chambers, sort of having conversations about rethinking um, how you're advising businesses to be able to make it through these ebbs and flows? Good. Thankfully, you've had some other scenarios that maybe made your conversation a little bit more advanced. But
Yeah.
what in the chamber ecosystem are you having conversations about? What are new models? What are next plans? How do we make sure that these businesses are prepared as we move forward?
No, that's a great question, and I love that you teach dance. I'm the chair of the board at the New World School of the Arts,
Oh, nice.
and
Very
our
nice.
dance program is one of our most outstanding strands within it, and the students are amazing there. And I'm so excited. The college graduation was, I think, 2 weeks ago, and the high school graduation's in a couple weeks. And
Very nice. Very
the
nice.
students always perform during that, and our dance students are incredible. So
Really?
love hearing that.
Do most of
You
them
know,
leave to go to New York?
some
And
of them do. The keynote speaker um, is a graduate for our college students a couple weeks ago. Is a graduate of New World School of the
okay.
Arts, and she is a choreographer at Ailey too.
Oh, nice. Very
So
nice.
so we've got some folks that are in serious spots. Some will leave the high school. We've had a couple that have gone to like Juilliard and other
Mhm.
really amazing schools. Because New World has four strands: it's music, it's theater, it's dance, and it's visual arts. And so,
Mhm. Mhm.
we were very lucky for many years to have a guy who would dance for the Limon Company, and so Danny ran our program, and now we have Mary Lisa, and students they're great.
Very good.
Dancers are fearless. That's what I always feel like when they take the stage.
I agree.
It's just them and the floor
I
and their
agree.
bodies. And
And they just take control.
take
Just
control. I was talking to the dean of dance the other day, and I said, this young lady went out and performed a solo performance. She says, well, she choreographed that, and she's in high school. My mind was like blown. But to your question, and I'll look at it from two angles. I think first is, you were doing what you do, right? You were like, this is who I am, and we're trying to find as much normalcy as possible. I think secondly is you're right about the restaurants. So remember, the governor opened Florida beginning of May, so we were maybe only 6 or 8 weeks into the earliest days of COVID. And not every industry, but restaurants were included in that. But he didn't let Miami-Dade open for another 3 weeks. So May 20th is when I remember being at one of our restaurants, and it was Cafe Abraci, and the mayor at the time was reopening it. We did a press conference, but there were three messages. One is that even if you're not comfortable, dining in, because it was at 50% was the
Mhm.
capacity. The best thing to do is to go and sit outside or order takeout, because we were learning that the delivery services were upping their rates from their traditional 18% to 30%.
Mhm.
And so the restaurants didn't want to raise their prices. So they were taking that out of their back end, if you will. So of their profits. And they had already, been struggling. And listen, we love our restaurants. We have 150 in Coral Gables, and we have over 60 of those that are members of ours.
Mhm.
But they are quintessentially small business. So some of
Right.
them struggle with, applying for a PPP loan because their paperwork's over here and it's over there, and
Mhm.
I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to enter those last receipts.
Right.
And so the first round of PPP was gone in an instant, and I guarantee you there were very few small restaurants that took advantage of that. But the other big thing that we did, and listen, I have a meeting with the mayor tomorrow, was create an outdoor dining, temporary dining scenario,
Nice.
which was very robust, and everybody here was available upon a call, email, or me cajoling them to go visit with a restaurant, figure out how many seats they could have. Was it sidewalk? Would it be in the right of way? Would we use a parking space? And by the way, we've extended that 3 times, really at the behest of the chamber
Mhm.
and out of the graciousness of the city. And so I'm very proud of that advocacy. But my meeting with the mayor tomorrow is to extend it through the summer. And there's a different appetite now, no pun intended, about wanting to do that, because
Right. I agree.
people want to, they want to derive some of the revenue that they're not getting, because that was all done at no charge.
Right.
And then secondly, it could impact, the zoning requirements of that restaurant long term, having an extra 20 seats.
Right.
And it could affect, everything from, you know, uh, just how they manage their parking. I mean, it's crazy to think about that, but that's how your restaurant gets open. I've got 50 seats. That means I need 8 parking spaces. Here,
Right.
you need this. So
Right.
I get that, but I'm going to show him something tomorrow, but based on where we're eating, about how important it is to continue to have that. And even if it's run through September 1, which is what we're advocating, a lot of people, even though it's really warm and could be, the doldrums of the summer,
Mhm.
that's still what they want. And they'll sacrifice
Absolutely.
being a little sweaty at lunch to be able to sit outside.
Exactly.
But that's
Exactly.
okay. But that's part of that, not only the work that we do, I think, in being an advocate and a champion, I also think it relates to what you're talking about is that creative approach. And so, are these restaurants still using the Uber Eats and DoorDash and Postmates? Absolutely.
Right.
Is it still expensive? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And add to that any staffing. I had said it'd be great for you all to create like a delivery pool because in the early days, folks weren't working. I
Right.
said, well, maybe when they order, you can deliver. Your front of house person's now a delivery person. Well, a lot of folks didn't want to do that, and as you know, a lot of folks left the workforce
Right.
because they took advantage of some resources and some employment support. And I get that because you work 40 hours in a restaurant, even if you're making $10 an hour, the government assistance for a while was above that.
Exactly. I
So
agree. I agree. That's what I said. I was like, we really need to rethink um, our payment structure. If someone would rather sit at home and receive government assistance than have a good paying job, folks that have had jobs for years, there's something to be said about that for sure.
I agree, and I can't put my finger on it other than we have work to do in terms of a greater community, greater
Mhm.
business community, to address those on the macro level. Whether our wages are
Hmm.
not matching, cost of living and other expenses, and that certainly is popping now with inflation where it is. But in the early days of the pandemic, it was, survival, and then it
Right.
was, do I really want to go back? Maybe I have a health issue, or I can get $625 plus state subsidy and I'd have to work 100 hours at the restaurant to make that amount of money.
And if you look at mother like childcare, the
Hmm.
cost of
Weren't open,
childcare,
and
it's
they weren't
almost
open.
cheaper for me to stay home with my kids than to
That's
invest
right.
in
I have
childcare.
a,
I know
I
mothers who
sort of laugh about that because after a while, people are like, I really would like them to go back to school. Or um,
right.
in the beginning, a friend of mine used to say it was the strain on her Wi-Fi, and then it was the strain on her refrigerator because her boys were home just munching a crowd. Like.
Just a strain on her mental health. Like
Well, and I would say, Althea, are you in your laundry room? She's like, it's the only quiet place with good Wi-Fi. And I would just, and those were the early days when we were on the Zoom every day, and I would just sort of laugh
yes,
and think to myself, all I get's a little side eye from my dog. I guess I deserve
exactly,
that.
exactly. I have cats. They look at me as long as I feed them, we're fine.
Like, why are you
But
here?
but yeah, I was talking to a gentleman who is our insurance man or our
Yeah,
financial advisor, and he would talk to me on Zoom and then go, "Okay, I need y'all to be quiet." It's like, I get it. It's okay.
I love that. I love
It's
that.
okay. But so we are in an ecosystem that has been, before the pandemic, it touted and took great pride in being 85% small business.
Yes.
I think over the pandemic, we've started to realize that we've got to really focus very heavily on scaling some of those businesses up.
Mhm.
Because as you mentioned, a small business, a really small business might not be able to hire a lot of people and might not be able to hire a lot of people at a living wage. And so I feel as if there are some conversations that are starting to happen, but what actual actions have been happening here locally as well as nationally? I think we are the ecosystem that carries the largest amount of small businesses in the nation.
Yes.
So what are those plans starting to be, and is that a national conversation or is that something that's just happening here?
So that's a great, sort of looking at today and into the future kind of
Mhm.
question. And so what I would say is, we started talking about that early on in the pandemic for two reasons. I think one was we knew that was going to be an instrument for recovery. And two, we also knew that we probably wouldn't do business like we had done it for years ever again.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know if we could have predicted that we had such a large cross section of people who decided to resign. And that number is pivoting into I'm resigning, but I'm going to work in this. They're not just
Mhm.
sitting at
Mhm.
home. So I don't want the great resignation to be seen as I'm just leaving the workforce altogether. I'm looking for something that is a better fit. And this is a
Definitely.
seller's market right now. And so I think people can be demanding, can be, creative. The other thing I can tell you is candidly, people are now moving into kind of the great renegotiation, which is
Uh-huh.
I need this or I need that, or I'm going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think it's meant in an ultimatum sense. It's just I now have a better handle on me.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was at an event a couple of nights ago and I turned to a friend of mine and I said, gosh, this feels like 2019. It's like we haven't learned any lessons.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just the way people were maybe interacting, some people acting a fool. And I thought to myself, I'm like, what have you learned? And then I'm like, I better check myself. And so I was at a ribbon cutting for a new restaurant last night and I was looking around the room and I was like, wow. I said, I'm doing it too. I got to get my act together.
Right. Right.
Because I made a commitment also to focus a little bit more on my own boundaries and mental health.
Mhm.
Like I said, I came to work each day. And so a lot of time I spent was being on conversations about what a post pandemic work environment would look like. And I would say we got maybe 50% of it wrong. I think the predictions were more remote opportunities. Okay.
Mhm.
I would give you that. I don't think it's at the level or the percentage that people predicted.
Mhm.
I think, secondly, is to your point that a lot of places closed. So, where did those folks go? Where did they take
Uh-huh.
maybe that business dream? Have they reimagined that?
Okay.
I think some took it as an opportunity to do the ultimate pivot, which say, this has run its course. This is what I am doing now. I think people have used this as an opportunity to reinvent themselves, not only as individuals, but as professional individuals.
Right.
And I love having those conversations with folks because there's always going to be a space for them in the ecosystem. The great thing about the ecosystem that you talk about is it's alive, it's living, it's breathing,
Mhm.
it's growing, you know, it's it's molding itself to what today is.
Mhm. It's
At a national level, I think we are a little bit different because I think Florida is different. I think our governor was aggressive and opened more quickly than other states did,
true.
which led to a pretty significant migration to Florida, not only temporarily, but now we're looking at it permanently.
Mhm.
So Florida, which used to be a very economical state, not necessarily Miami-Dade, but Florida, is no longer that case.
Right.
We still don't have a state income tax, but we are filling the coffers with new residents and people who are coming here looking to buy a home,
Mhm.
which is not
Mhm.
easy, not cheap.
Right.
So that's going to affect wages of the future.
Mhm.
That's going to affect what our workforce looks like. We're not a big manufacturing state.
Mhm.
We're a big service state, so whether that's hospitality. We're
Mhm.
also a very, very large agriculture state, which a lot
Right.
of folks don't think about. But you leave my office and drive 30 minutes south, and you're in Homestead, Florida City.
Mhm.
That is literally,
It's farmland.
fruit and farm basket
Mhm.
of our community. And
It
so
is.
those are different conversations that I think we're having. And then the other thing is I worked with 18 of our local chambers throughout the last 2 years, whereas we typically would be a little bit more competitive in a healthy way. But now I convened that group every week for the first 6 months.
Mhm.
Now we're together every other month, and we're sharing a lot more. We're collaborating. I think we're going to come out of this with the businesses being more collaborative. I think co-location of businesses is very cool.
Right.
Allows you to share staffs. I saw just very few of those when we would go and look at retailers. Now I see a lot more of that.
Very
People are almost
interesting.
kind of like subletting space, but then they're working together. Think of it like a workspace where somebody's down the hall, but they do a CPA work, and you're like, I need that.
Right.
How it's happening with neighbors and across, and the chambers I think can be really very good conduits for that. So I think we're going to see more co-location, more collaboration. I think we'll still see some more consolidation. But at the end, if we can serve as the great convener for those, then I think chambers are occupying a new space that is going to ensure our long-term survival. We've been here, like I said, 97, 98 years. We're not going anywhere.
Right. I think you're a staple. I do. I
Yeah.
do. And that co-location thing, I don't think I've ever heard that, but that's a very interesting
Let me
idea.
tell you, I only ever saw one of those live and in person. It was in Las Olas, and I went up with our retail specialist just to see it. It was a coffee shop located next to a flower shop, but they were in the same space. And so in the end, when they consolidated a little bit, they had some space to sublet. And so it brought in a lot more foot traffic because people wanted the coffee shop, right? That's a good, burn and churn kind of business.
Right.
But when they realized while they were waiting for their coffee, they had these beautiful flowers. Well, people
Right.
love flowers. Let me tell you, that was my COVID jam, right? So I have all of these new flowers and things that I'm so into that I never was before, because I was never home in the light. I left before dark and I came home after dark.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
now during that period, so this morning when I was outside, I was looking at some plants and I'm like, gosh, those things are really flowering like crazy. I
That's
didn't do
cool.
much other than, ask Mother Nature to shine upon me.
That's a
Um,
very cool
but I
idea.
hope people will keep some of those, boundaries. I'm struggling with it already because the
I
pull is
agree.
there to bring you back to what we did. And I tell people, we promised ourselves we weren't going to be crazy like this anymore.
Right. 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 I said the same. I was right before the pandemic. I was telling someone I just felt like I was on a rat race. Just spinning. It was chaos. And
Every day.
the first the first part of the pandemic, although scary, it was actually relaxing to know that I didn't have like this long calendar. But I'm trying very hard to make sure it doesn't get back to that rat race. It's hard though. It's very hard.
It's
Um,
hard. Well, I'm going to call upon you when I'm having my struggle because I need a consigliere who will say, take a time
Stop
out,
it.
because
Give yourself a
it's
minute.
definitely uh, it's definitely happening. I mean, what today is Wednesday, and so I had a board meeting on Monday night in person. I went to a restaurant opening last night. Tonight we're hosting an event, so it's happening like I promised myself
You
it
would not
wouldn't. And then when I see people, I'm like, we're back at it, and they're like, I know, I'm so annoyed with myself because you have no one else to blame.
exactly. But yourself, you have got to manage your
Yeah,
calendar for sure. I agree. So we talked about very briefly the summit on Friday. I went to. It was my first summit. I think it was your second, right?
it was our second. Yeah,
I will say I really enjoyed myself, and I think I told you
thank you.
right before that it was very educational for me. I definitely learned a lot of good and important information that I need to really get into as my for myself. The thing I noticed was it the summit, and I think I shared this with you, was very much a conversation that felt about, you know, having businesses think through the scale up plan, their scale up growth, how to get from one level to another. I'm in a different community and I don't think I've been to several summits and workshops. I don't know that I've ever been to one that was that detailed about the scale up.
Yeah.
So how are you um working with and understanding how other chambers are operating, and how are you, I guess, supporting one another in regards to helping their businesses, or are most chambers kind of locked into doing those kinds of summits based on their own clientele?
So that's a great question. And again, I think we as organizations do want to be as in tune with our membership as possible. And so sometimes that drives the conversation, drives the programming. We have taken a little bit of a different approach, and that is we want to bring people along at the same time as we are meeting them where they are. So it's a little bit of both. And I'm very happy that you walked away with kind of picking up what was the subtle goal around scale up, because last year was really about survival
Right.
and really about resources. And so the folks who spoke last year, and we did have two speakers come back because in our surveys they were so well received. Um, but the big focus last year was on resources. So we had SBA.
Mm-hmm.
and really about surviving. We had the city present on a grant program. But what I would tell you this time, it was okay. We're over that hump, but there are many other humps in front of us. So what is the most important thing? And again, I think, our presenting sponsor, Lily and Sir, had been through the 10,000 Small Business Program that Goldman
Mm-hmm.
Sachs does. And again, that's really the theme of that program, for businesses that have been in business for 3 to 5 plus years,
Mm-hmm.
is, well, where are you going? Are you stuck? Are you stagnant? And I think our question was similar, but it was, all right, you've gotten maybe back to where you were, or you're still working at that.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get you back on track on what your plans were in
Before.
2018,
Mm-hmm.
2019.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, we're redoing our strategic plan as a chamber. I have my first call. We hired a company and we're getting together this Friday because our plan, it doesn't work for us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're a different organization. This is a different economy. And to your point, it really is how we're going to scale with our businesses.
Right.
And in our case, it's not about just membership. It's about, we need to lend our voice in a stronger way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like what I said to you at the beginning of our conversation, we've stepped out of our lane, that we've traditionally been in. And not everybody's on board with that. Sometimes they're like, well, why is the chamber at the table on this?
Right.
I remember being asked that, and the mayor said, because I invited them. And I thought to myself, that's all we need. You give us an invitation,
And we're in. Yeah.
we're in, and we're gonna use that to its fullest. If you're a business and someone says to you, let's collaborate, and it makes sense, that's a scale up opportunity.
Yes.
We worked so much with our businesses during COVID to say to them, use this quiet time to look at your business as strategically,
Mm-hmm.
as profoundly as possible. To our retailers, do you really have a robust online presence?
Mm-hmm.
I don't just mean e-commerce. I mean, can people find you and take advantage of you,
Right.
in a
Right.
way that not only helps your business, but brings you a whole new audience?
Right.
And then, the other piece of that was saying to other businesses, what are you doing to work on your business? We're almost always too busy to work on our business.
Exactly.
We're never busy to work in it. We're showing up, we're opening the front door,
Right.
calling that client, going to a summit. That's a combination of working in, but you were working on your business Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that's
Yes, exactly.
what it is. That number needs to be, I'm telling you, it's 99 to 1.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
1% of your time is working on it. And, I told our staff, what are 10 things that we can do during COVID that we never get to?
Mm-hmm.
So, we redid our brand.
Oh,
We
nice.
sold our building and moved our office. We built a new website. We opened a welcome center. So we're a little bit different than most of our peers. And I know you asked that question, but it was all about timing. And we were on the cusp of that anyway. But we
Mm-hmm.
didn't let it stop us or deter us. As a matter of
Right.
fact, it gave us a whole new way to showcase the organization. And I love it when people visit our office for the first time. We've been here a year and a half already. And they're like, wow, this is great. And I'm like, welcome home.
Woo.
We didn't, do what I think a lot of businesses did, was like, you know, wonder what to do next. If you
Right.
were part of a chamber, we talked about that every day, every single day. And if you weren't sure, then, we connected you to the right people. So
Right.
I think a lot of our peers did that, but my fear is falling back into our very traditional
Absolutely.
models. And I see it a little bit already, and I see it a little bit even with myself and my approach. And so I'm gonna, smack myself on the hand. So
Yes, we need to shake it up a little bit. It's businesses as well.
yeah,
I
thank
definitely
you for understanding what the subtle theme was on Friday. And I really give a lot of credit to Lily and the planning team, because they took that page out of another organization's book. I'm not sure it would have been in our book, but the minute it started happening, and you listen to a Chris Colley, or you listen to a conversation that Valeria Grunbaum has, who's got energy for days,
right.
and it's really about, I used to do this, but now I do that.
Right.
And I hope the takeaway was, well, wait a minute, I can do that.
Is there, I did walk away with, like, if there's one thing I need to do that I learned today, that I have not been intentional about, and I felt like I did walk away with a couple of things that could, really help me with that scale and
I
go,
love that word, by the way,
what
intentionality. We do not use that word
I
enough because it sounds like a homework assignment,
it does.
right?
It really,
And I think it can be intimidating. But I will tell you this, and I mentioned to you this when we were in the green room, is that, we've paid more attention to our membership, the diversity of our membership. But I have said to our leadership, we have to be intentional.
right.
It doesn't happen naturally in this community.
Absolutely.
It requires some intentionality. And so we've used that word in a lot of different spaces, and it's allowed us the comfort to step into those other lanes.
I agree. I
And
agree.
I'll tell you this, we're doing a program next week with our women's business lunch group, who've been, by the way, they were the one committee that met every month,
Oh,
hosted an event every month, even if it was virtual, came back in person pretty early in terms of, we'll scale up, we'll limit it to 25, then 35, then 45.
mhm.
And they're doing a whole conversation about, mental health and where are we,
Right.
and taking stock. Because I can see it, I think people tire out
Hmm.
in a way that they don't recognize what that is. Because, we're always taught to be ready to go, right? You have a big
Yes.
personality, I do too. People feed off that energy and you give it away freely. But you got to remember, at the end of the day, if you don't have it, you can't give it.
Exactly. I agree with that. I agree with that. And that's been a conversation I think me and many of my entrepreneur girlfriends are having, you know, having to kind of
I hear
hunker down and stop for a
you.
moment. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I think I learned a lot and I hope my audience did too. But where can we find you?
So I appreciate it. And first of all, this is my favorite thing to do, is to have a conversation with a community leader who's also walking that talk and isn't just talking about it in the, sort of empirical sense, but you're out there doing it every day. I want to be involved in this girlfriends group that gets together. It's not, by the way, that's my biggest thing now, is like, I'm afraid of being excluded from something. Hey, I'm
Somebody's
here.
having some fun somewhere and I'm missing it.
So you can find us at the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce. Our phone number, 305-446-1657. You can find us online directly through our website, which is coralgableschamber.org. It's O-R-G at the end there. And then our social media plugs, well, we're on every channel. But the biggest are probably Instagram and Facebook at Gables Chamber. We do have a YouTube channel, Gables Communications, where we record all of our online programs and where that will hang out. And we're on LinkedIn, of course, which is a great tool that I've gotten a lot more invested and involved in during COVID, really at the behest of our staff. And they use it a lot for prospecting members, and it's really been really fruitful.
Okay.
We're not on Snap yet, and we're not on TikTok yet, but we are on Twitter, and I am on Twitter as well at Chamber Prez, Prez. But I spend a lot of time talking about my beloved Florida Gators, so that may not be everybody's appetite, right? So
Gator,
I do that with full disclosure. Yeah, I waited till the end to tell you
I'm
that.
a Seminole.
Well, I knew that because Zach told me, and I said, Zach, you went to Hofstra.
You don't know.
Nobody knows, but we have common enemies.
Oh, yes, we do. We really do.
Talk about them because they're our dear friends here in Coral Gables. But
Those hurricanes.
on certain days of the week, we are in synchronicity with them.
That's true. We always did connect when it came to being
Yes, ma'am.
hurricanes.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you so much. And you have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening in. And as always, it's a pleasure to be with you and to mix it up. Invite me anytime.
Thanks so much. So that was a good conversation. If you are here in the Miami area, I definitely recommend you reach out to a chamber near you, Coral Gables Chamber, because I think they are a wealth of information and a source of good, good guidance when you are in good times and bad. I'll see you next time. See you next week. Talk to you soon.